hearts and our minds. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Have you ever thought of God's sense of humor? Does God have a sense of humor? Think about it. Think about it in just the people He called. Abram, Moses, Zechariah, old men, even by their own standards. But on the other end of the spectrum, what about Samuel, David, Jeremiah, Timothy? All men considered too young, too immature. Did you notice in the reading in 1 Samuel, it said that Samuel had yet to know the Lord. And then, of course, we could throw in the women. Deborah, who was a judge. Ruth, an outsider, a Moabite. Esther and Mary, who were probably young teenage women. And then you can throw in Paul, the Pharisee. All of these are people God spoke to. People that God called. You know Samuel's story. And one of the things I think we really need to do is begin to learn again these great Bible stories. If you know ever watched Jeopardy, you know the subject that most people stay away from is the Bible because they don't know the story anymore. Samuel's mother, Hannah, was one of two wives. We won't go there. But Elkanah, her husband, married two women. And it says, if you read the first chapter of 1 Samuel, that he loved Hannah more than he loved his other wife. But that Hannah was unable to have children. And so his other wife ridiculed and teased her because of it. Year after year after year. But Hannah got a double portion of the food and everything else because he loved her so much more. And on one of their yearly trips to Shiloh to worship and to present offerings, Hannah is so caught up in prayer for a son. One that she has promised to dedicate to God. But she's carrying on in such a way that the priest Eli thinks she's drunk, even though it's early in the morning. And being sympathetic, he goes out and accuses her of being drunk. And she said, "No, I'm so intense in prayer." And she tells him why. And his words are simply, "Go home and see what God does." You know, if you want encouragement, Eli was the guy. But she conceives and Samuel is born. And she has dedicated Samuel to be a Nazirite, like John the Baptist, and to serve God his whole life. How many of you today have dedicated your children to serve God before they were born? You know, Tony Campolo says he had no choice but to be a preacher because his mother told him he was going to be one his whole life. He said, what other choice did I have? My mother told me. And as soon as he is weaned, she takes him to Shiloh to serve with Eli. And it says that once a year when she visits, she brings him a new set of clothes. And that's the beginning of Samuel's story. And God's word, it says, has been silent. There hasn't been a word of the Lord in a long time. Eli's sons are corrupt. What can I say? That's what it says. And so we have God coming and speaking to Samuel. But Samuel is there to serve Eli, and so he thinks it's Eli that's calling him in the night. He rushes in to see what Eli wants. And it has to happen 3 times before Eli realizes that something strange is happening here. And he tells Samuel to say these words the next time, the 4th time. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And it's not a happy message he gives. But Samuel is now going to grow in wisdom of the Lord, it says. And he's going to anoint 2 kings of Israel. Saul and David. And then we have this fellow named Nathaniel. I don't know what to do with Nathaniel. He's got a bias. Now, I know none of you have biases against anything, right? I mean, I could say one word this morning and it would get me in trouble. New England Patriots. Didn't say that. But Philip comes and says, we found the Messiah. We've got the greatest good news on earth. He's here. It's Jesus of Nazareth. And what does Nathaniel say? Can anything good come from Nazareth? Maybe Jesus of Jerusalem, Jesus of here, Jesus of there, but certainly not of Nazareth. Nazareth maybe wasn't even big enough to have a dot on the map. Now, Jerusalem, that was the important city. That was the capital city. The wise men came seeking Jesus of Jerusalem, not Jesus of Nazareth. And we all have biases. It could be age, could be sex, male, female, could be country, it could be custom. We wonder, can anything good come from? But at least Nathaniel knows. I wonder what our biases are. I thought of a congregation we served in New Hampshire. And the biggest controversy we had while I was there was that the teenagers wanted to do something in church. And so they wanted to take the offering. Seems harmless enough, right? Except all of the older folk and most of the women were against it. I remember one woman said when they grow up, they can take some jobs, but they're too young. It's not skilled labor to take an offering, to serve an ushers. We decided to let them do it, and you know what? They even smiled as they were taking the offering of people. Well, where's our bias? Age, sex, religion, nationality, race. Eli recognized that God was calling. Now think about that. Here, Eli is God's priest. He's the one in charge of all things holy, we might say. And here was God calling a young man and speaking to him. It did take a while, as we noted, for him to realize that it was God calling. And he had enough sense to direct Samuel in the right way. Even though the message that Samuel gets is not the message that Eli wants to hear. But he listens to it anyway. Nathanael didn't think anything good could come from Nazareth. But yet, as we said, he went with Philip to meet Jesus. And we only hear of Nathanael one more time. That's in John chapter 21, verse 2, where Jesus appears to some of the disciples. And Nathanael is listed as one of the disciples that Jesus meets with. He's not listed as one of the 12. He's not mentioned in any of the other Gospels. He's not mentioned in Matthew, Mark, or Luke. But he has these two important little notes in John's Gospel. Questioning, and then the fact that once he met Jesus, he followed after him and is listed in the sacred story. You see, as I thought about this, I thought of how God's humor challenges our perspective. How God's humor challenges our thinking. I mean, how many of you have said to somebody, well, you're too old to do this? More often we say, well, you're too young to do this. You need to grow up a little more. None of you have ever heard that, right? None of you have ever said that, I know. But the message was not what Samuel wanted to hear. God's call may not be what we want to hear. It may challenge us to move in new and different directions. It may open new doors. It may challenge what we think. It may cause us to do something terrible. Change. It is dangerous to say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." Because it means we're willing to hear what God has for us. Two illustrations came to mind, both dealing with the Philippines. The first was I was at Central Philippine University as they were honoring their alumni of the year. And he had just been honored in the United States as being the leading cardiac surgeon of the United States. A graduate of Central Philippine University. And as he was sharing his story with us, he unfortunately reminded us that back when we began our mission in the Philippines, we had the opportunity to start a medical college to train doctors. But the missionaries back then said, we don't think any Filipino can be trained to be a doctor. We'll train them to be nurses. So they started one of the finest, and still one of the finest, nursing schools in the Philippines. But then he said, and here am I, a Filipino, a graduate of this university, and I was just recognized as the greatest cardiac surgeon in the United States. Somebody was wrong. And yes, we were wrong. The biases creep in. But thankfully now there are some great medical schools in the Philippines. Central Philippine University is just starting the MD program. The other one comes from the church that we decided to attend. A little church outside of Iloilo, Leganés. And the first Sunday we were there and went in to visit, we were met by a charming young woman. Well, maybe 13. I later realized I was wrong, but I learned not to try to guess the ages of any woman, let alone Asian women, because you look so much younger than most of you really are. But she said, "Hi, I'm chairman of the Board of Deacons." And I said, "I thought you're what?" And she, later I learned that she was about 30. She was 29 and 9 months. So she was almost 30. But the church had had the wisdom to put young people on all of their major boards and committees, and saw in this young woman the ability to change and to carry them on before she reached age 30. She and a group of young people were challenging that church to move out beyond its walls. And if you know the Philippines, you know that most churches are built around walls and compounds. So she was really forcing them to go outside their walls and out into the barrios and do ministry. Because she listened as God's prayer. To pray that prayer is a dangerous prayer to pray. Speak, Lord, for thy servant is listening. It might change the world. Shall we pray? Are we listening to your voice, O God? Are our hearts and minds attuned to your word for us in 2018? Are we willing to hear what your word is saying to us? What you are calling us to do and to be? Are we willing to be challenged by what may be new and different and innovative? Are we willing to pray, speak, Lord, for thy servant is listening? Amen. Number 667, Lord.